The Breakup is the 17th episode of the first season of The Middle. This is directed by Wendey Stanzler, and as always, there will be spoilers from now as I talk about the episode and share some thoughts. And interestingly, this is an episode that I remember really well. As I've mentioned before, I used to watch the show a lot back in the day, and there are some episodes, in fact most episodes, I don't remember very well because my memory just isn't great. But this one, I did remember, and I think that's mostly because of the character of Morgan. And I'll talk more about Morgan in a moment, but I will talk about the subplot first of all, because I don't have that many thoughts, but I did really thoroughly enjoy it. And this revolves around the fact that Sue is babysitting Brick, and she's watching a scary zombie film, and Brick wants to watch it with her. And initially she says, no, you're too young, but Brick convinces her because he says, well, if you need to ask our parents if I can watch it, maybe you're not mature enough to be babysitting me anyway. And that definitely worked. And they watched it, and they became terrified, which is completely relatable for me as a child. Nowadays, I can binge watch horror with rarely any after effects, depending on the film. But back when I was Sue's age, and certainly when I would have been Brick's age, horror films really scared me. And occasionally throughout the film, this fear comes back to bite them. And my favourite scene revolving around this part of the story is when they're at the school for Axl's basketball game. And Brick goes to the bathroom, Sue takes him, and the janitor comes along, and it's good fun. It's very atmospheric. I really thoroughly enjoyed that part of the narrative. I don't have too many more thoughts on that, but I certainly liked it. The main narrative focuses on the fact that Axl has a girlfriend. She's called Morgan. She's played by PenaVega. And one of the great things about going back to watch The Middle is that I've seen quite a lot of films with PenaVega over the last few years. So that actually means more to me now, which was quite fun. And we meet her when Frankie has to go and do the snack bar at the school sports hall. And Morgan, the character, pretends that she doesn't know who Frankie is, and it seems like Axl told her his parents were dead, but she's only joking, and she's actually really delighted to meet Frankie, and she seems very sickly sweet, to be perfectly honest. She comes over to the house now that she's met them. She brings a basket of muffins, and she answers Frankie's questions, but she kind of just gives all of the information that Frankie would want before she even asks them. She seems honestly like the perfect person, and it's a little bit unnerving, but it's not necessarily what one might expect. I don't remember how I felt the first time I watched this, and as I said, for whatever reason, I can remember this one quite well, but I feel like it seems like something's going to go wrong with the character, like she's going to say something that proves that actually she's not that sickly sweet, and there is a dark side to her, but that's not the case. She breaks up with Axl because she wants somebody who is focused more on, focus, and less on just fun. She wants somebody who's actually going places, and I can't fault her for that. And we have this really fabulous moment. I feel like this is probably, I could be wrong, I could be misremembering, but I feel like this is the first time we get to see any emotion from Axl at all. And he's crying into Frankie because his heart is broken, and young love is definitely going to be absolutely agonizing when it's over, because it feels like the end of the world to Axl, even though they've only been together a number of weeks. And it really shows that actually he's just a little boy who wants comfort from his mother, and it's really sweet and really well done. And then of course Mike comes home, and Axl isn't going to be crying in front of his father. And then Mike actually has a talk with Axl, and this is largely because Frankie played Axl a tape that she'd saved when Mike left her a message on her answer phone when they were first dating, asking her to take him back. And Mike was actually really annoyed that Frankie had let Axl hear that. And on the one hand, I understand, because that's Mike showing his vulnerability, and he doesn't want anybody, regardless of whether it's his son, listening to that exceptionally vulnerable moment. But at the same time, I think it was a really great, important teaching lesson for Axl to realise that actually everybody hurts. And it was really well done. And then Mike has a conversation in front of the fridge with Axl, and I think the conversation was as powerful as we could expect from Mike, who doesn't really wear his heart on his sleeve, to put it plainly. Unfortunately, Axl kind of takes things too far. And I will say it brilliantly plays out. It's very dramatic, very well done. They're playing basketball, and of course, Morgan is a cheerleader on the side. And when Axl has the ball, he dribbles up to her and he basically says, I'm not going to shoot this ball or shoot the basket. I'm not entirely sure what the phrase is. I'm not going to do this until you go out with me again, which is manipulative. That's very manipulative, and I don't agree with what Axl did. I don't agree with that at all. But also, even if it wasn't manipulative, it definitely just seems desperate and not the way to go. However, in a surprising turn of events, things actually worked out in his favour, because a lot of other girls thought that this was really sweet, that he cared so much about Morgan that he was willing to lose the game to get back with her, which I have to say is really sweet. I don't agree with the manipulation tactic, but the fact that in that moment he was saying, you mean more to me than winning this basketball game, is actually really sweet. And I imagine most people, if they're dating somebody who's into sports, would like to think that they or the relationship is more important than the sport itself. So actually, I think the intentions were good, but the way he delivered things, not necessarily the best. But it was a really nice episode focusing on a different side to Axl that we don't normally get to see, and I really thoroughly enjoyed it. The main narrative was great, very well done, and the story with Sue and Brick was nice. I enjoyed it as a horror fan, but as somebody who grew up absolutely not going anywhere near horror, I watched The Little Vampire when I was about 7 or 8. In fact, when was that film released? 2000, so I would have been 8. I watched the film and I was terrified, absolutely terrified, and it put me off horror until I was an adult, and now it's my favourite genre. So I don't really know what that says, but the point there is that I absolutely could relate to Sue and Brick in that moment, and my reaction to The Little Vampire is basically their reaction to that film. And then, of course, Axl was fabulous. So, no complaints from me at all. I do think that the breakup is definitely a pretty solid episode of The Middle, one that I really thoroughly enjoyed. I do think the reason I remember it so vividly was because of the character of Morgan. I think Alexa PenaVega did a really great job with the character and Axl's vulnerabilities. It was nice to see him feeling vulnerable, because he only just doesn't care about anything, so it's nice to show that actually there is a different side to him, and ultimately I thought the episode was pretty great.